and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to talk about what I've learned over the years. Personal growth, shall we say. And I always think, you know, if I was 17, 18 again, would it have been nice to have had someone to explain all of this to me? Yes. If I had my older self explaining this to me when I was 17, 18, that would have made things a lot easier. But hey ho, we all learn different ways and it takes us different amounts of time to learn certain things. But one of them was being angry, being annoyed and being highly disappointed in myself. And it would usually be life. Something would happen and I would personally attack myself for it. And it would last a really long time. Sometimes this could last weeks on end. And for me, I felt like I was climbing this really high mountain, and each time something happened in life, I felt like I'd fallen all the way back down again. Not just one step or two steps, I felt like I was right back at the beginning and I'd have to start climbing all the way up again, which sounds exhausting, and it was. But then there was one day, I can't quite remember exactly how old I was. It might have been only 5 years ago, and I was working for a tour company. And I remember sitting on the coach once and I was just looking to see what money had come in and come out of my account, and I noticed that there was a phone bill for £70, which is a hell of a lot of money considering I think I was only paying £25 a month. I knew exactly where it had come from. It was when I was staying with my father in Ireland and I had called back home. And the thing is, I think it was only maybe a 7 or 8 minute phone call, but that had obviously just racked it all the way up. And again, I was disappointed in myself. I felt annoyed, I felt angry, and I just remember everything just drained. All the sort of goodness and happiness or whatever just drained, because I was like, I don't really have that amount of money. You know, that could have been an entire week sort of on food after I take out the 25. So yeah, again, I just thought, oh, this is another thing. Oh, something else in life has gone wrong. Oh, something else has not gone the way I planned. But this time I thought to myself, I can be annoyed, I can be angry, but I'm going to designate a certain amount of time for it, and it's going to be a lot less. So I gave myself an hour. I gave myself an hour to go and scream at a tree or a bush, because that's, well, we were at Dover at that point, so all I had to scream at were trees and bushes. I could hold all that anger, I could be rah, you know, just whatever, but I only gave myself 1 hour, because ultimately after that I thought, I can't do anything about it. That money's gone. It's not going to help me if I carry on stressing about it for days on end, because the worst thing that happens is if you start stressing about that, you then start hooking, which is what my sister taught me. You will start thinking about all the other stuff that went wrong, and by the end of the week you are so down. You just need to isolate what's happened in that moment, because that has nothing to do with all the other stuff that perhaps has gone wrong in your life. No, you leave that, you're only concentrating on this thing. And it was great, because after an hour, I did just think, okay, now I need to let that go and move on. I don't want it and I don't need it to ruin the rest of my day. Now, immediately after something happens, we can't just go, well, there's nothing I can do about that, so it's time to move on. A few people are like that, but quite a lot of humans, we can't. We need that processing time. We need to be annoyed and angry. However, we have the power to say to ourselves, well, how long? Well, you know what? I have the power to designate 1 hour or 2 hours or 3 hours. And that's the difference, because I feel a lot of the time I felt powerless and I felt completely out of control, and trying to learn what I could control took quite some time. But once you do, you actually realise you have a lot of power over yourself. but you've got to have a strong mind, and it takes a really long time to learn that. And you know, when I was younger, I didn't have any of these skills. I hadn't learned anything, and not I'd say my mind was weak, but it hadn't learned how to let things go. And so it just always felt fuzzy, stressful the whole time. And when you let that go, for me, I feel like my mind is so much stronger because it's so much clearer. But it's still a struggle. You know, it's something every day that I have to keep saying to myself, okay, I can't fix this, but I still want to be angry and annoyed because I'm someone who needs to process in order to get over it. I can't just switch off immediately, which is difficult, I think. I've noticed some people who are in relationships where one of the partner just goes, well, there's nothing you can do about it, so I don't know why you're crying. You know, oh, well, this has just happened, but you can't change it, so you might as well just get over it now. And that doesn't always work for everyone. You need that little bit of a time. I did learn there are certain things that need more time to be angry, upset and annoyed about. So if it was something slightly bigger, then I'd give myself perhaps one day. One day to wallow, to feel a bit annoyed at myself or whatever, but then I knew the next day it was going to be a nice brand new day, and I would make myself feel okay. Because ultimately, we are the one who actually holds the power in order to say, yeah, that's okay actually, I'm all right with this. But it does take effort. It's really not easy to let something go. But over the years, it has got a little bit easier. And there's a book that's called How Not to Give a SHIT. And it's fantastic because once you've sort of learned to do that, there are so many things that perhaps I used to panic about that now I'm just like, that's okay. I don't care about that. It's not as important as something else in my life. So I don't need to hold on to that, because it really does make life so much more difficult if you're just constantly annoyed at yourself for not doing something right. And over the years, even though people say life is up and down, I mean, it is constantly up and down. You cannot be annoyed at yourself for everything that doesn't go right, because it's going to continue doing that. But what changes is your mindset and how you deal with these things. And so finally, I got to one day, I was like, oh, that didn't affect me the same way. In fact, it affected me completely differently, to the point where I actually feel fine. You know, I actually feel good. I've actually managed to get to the point in my life where I can say I'm happy. When someone says, oh, are you happy in your life? I was like, oh my gosh, yes I am. I actually am. And the tipping point for me was actually in 2019. So not long ago, but it was one of my most favourite years. It's the year that I remember that everything, not just in my life, was changing, but yeah, me and myself, and how I wanted to view myself. And it was nice to look in the mirror and go, oh, I like you. And then, you know, 6 months down the time, oh, I really like you. And then eventually you get to the point where you're like, oh, I actually love myself. Considering that's only 2019, that's quite a few years beforehand that, you know, I was unhappy with myself. Sometimes when I was really younger, I hated myself because I think I didn't understand myself and no one else understood me. So that made it even more confusing. I couldn't understand myself as to why I wasn't fitting in the normal box. And the normal box would be to, you know, study, get a normal job that paid loads, even though you're absolutely miserable, and then find someone, marry, have a child, and all that sort of stuff. But I was wondering why I didn't really want that. And actual fact, when I was about, I think probably 18, 19, one of my ultimate fears was getting a normal 9-to-5 job. For me, that felt like prison. And I would sometimes have little panic attacks if I was going into a normal job, because I absolutely knew it wasn't right for me, but I didn't know why back then. I just thought, why can I not do this? Everyone else is doing this. This is part of life. Why do I feel completely and utterly trapped? Because I used to do a lot of weird and wonderful jobs. Hospitality was great because the times were always slightly different, and I was always going to different events, and for me that was quite exciting. Did I make a tremendous amount of money back then? No, I did not. But yeah, it was when I did actually finally get a sort of 9-to-5 job where I was like, oh my gosh, and getting up in the morning I found so difficult. And I was like, why am I feeling so low? What is wrong with me? Why is this not working? And I think what I tried to do is I tried to battle against myself and try and make myself okay with it, knowing fundamentally that I absolutely was not. And there was a couple of jobs when I was probably about 17, and they weren't paying me. They were terrible jobs, they really were. In fact, my mother and stepfather had to intervene and basically go and demand the money off them. They were awful people, they really were. But that obviously didn't make me feel great. I was in a position where I didn't know how to, ask for my own money that I've obviously worked for in this establishment. They had to sort of come and help me out. In fact, one of them still, owes me now, a lot of years later on. But I think it was, yes, learning to, I didn't even know that you could one day look in the mirror and go, oh, I love you. Because that wasn't, I don't know, it wasn't necessarily around when I was 17, 18. I just thought, oh, well, this is part of life. You mess up, you make mistakes, but no one sat me down and said, that's okay, by the way. In fact, how are you going to learn? You need to make all these mistakes. I just thought, I'm a bit of a crap person and can't get things right. So that was my mindset for a really, really long time. Once you're used to that, old habits die hard. So trying to change that mindset is very, very difficult indeed. And I mean, you could go on and on, but I think for starters, that really, really did help me when it came to trying to deal with things that, didn't go how I wanted them to, was just designating a certain amount of time. So yeah, if it was something bigger, like, I don't know, maybe I'd made a mistake at work and I was really disappointed in myself perhaps, I would say, okay, that deserves a day. I'm going to give that self, that issue or that problem a day. But guaranteed, I would say probably 9 times out of 10, the next day, I would feel fine. I would feel completely and utterly refreshed. And then sometimes there were slightly smaller things where I'm like, okay, I'm going to give that 2 hours, which we haven't actually said to anyone, but they'll probably find out after watching this video. When I went to Iceland with my father, we both live in fairyland every now and again, and I keep forgetting that when we're together, one of us needs to be on it, otherwise it kind of falls apart. And I remember that we got to the airport, it was super early in the morning, I parked my car, blah, 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 and we'd gone and got like a drink, had a bit of breakfast, and I remember checking my time, and it was only like 6:15. I was like, okay, perfect, that's great. And then somehow, I don't know what happened, but that time went so quickly, and the next time I looked, it was 10:02, and already in my head I thought, the gate's closed. The gate has closed. And we still ran up there. No one was there. You just had 2 people standing there, and I knew that they were going to say, well, I'm sorry, we can't let you in now. I could still see the plane that was there, but I know once the gates closed, that was it. And of course, this was only at the beginning of the year, but all those old feelings of utter disappointment started to boil. They hadn't come to the surface. They were just simmering, because of course that was my go-to, right? When you're used to feeling and thinking a certain way, my body was already getting into, oh, I'm going to break down and cry now. Oh, I'm going to hate myself for this, for not checking the time earlier. But I thought, okay, well, hold on, let's just try and figure this out first. So, I sort of said to my dad, I can't believe that's happened. Right, let's go to the information desk and see what we can do. And to this day, I still want to go back to the airport and ask for this lady because she was absolutely amazing. Her personality was wonderful, her mood was great, and she was just super helpful, friendly, smiley. She said, "Oh, don't worry, this happens quite a lot actually." Already that made me feel better because you want to know that you're not the only one who messes up. And even though you know that, it's just nice to hear it. He said, "Right, let's see what we can do, you know, okay, there's another flight later today. You've only got to pay an extra, I think it was like £200. And that was for both of us. And I thought, you know what, that could have been a lot worse. And because she was just being so lovely, that utterly calmed my nerves. Like immediately, all of those bubbly feelings went down. I said, is this really bad? Or have you actually now fixed it? Okay, you've got to stay a little bit, you know, longer in the airport, but is that such a huge thing? You're spending time with your dad, who you don't spend time with very often because he lives in a different country. So all of that was happening, and then suddenly I just went, oh, okay, this is actually not too bad. And I had one of the most fantastic conversations that I've had with him in a really, really long time, because we weren't doing anything. We weren't, you know, getting this ready or being on holiday or sorting out. We just had each other's company, and we were sitting on, you know, this really nice long comfy bench for about 5 or 6 hours. But it was great. All we had to do was talk, which we don't actually get very often time to do. So it was great. In actual fact, I think it was supposed to turn out like that. So my dad's very much like that. He said, we were so not supposed to get on that plane. Something was telling us not to get on that plane. And I thought, yeah, you know what, actually, maybe it was. Maybe something else not so great would have happened. Or perhaps the universe was telling us, you need this little time together with your dad, not doing anything else. So that was, for me, that was a massive win. This is the other thing. When you start doing this, have little parties in your head. Because I had a massive party in my head when this happened, and I, you know, imagined patting myself on the back and going, that was a huge win. I am so proud of myself. I'm so happy, you know, that I didn't break down. I just thought, right, let's get through this. Let's actually see how bad this is. And if it really isn't, then there's no point stressing. We didn't miss anything because we hadn't booked any excursions or anything on the first day, so we missed nothing at all. If anyone out there struggles with blaming themselves every time something goes wrong, just try this. It might work for you. It might absolutely not work for you, but give it a go. And if it does work, just give yourself a little bit of a party. If you try it once and it works, and the next 3 times it doesn't work, that's not a problem. You're not going to get it all perfectly straight away. There were often times I would take 3 steps forward and like 5 back. It's a learning process, and trying to switch your brain to something else takes a really long time. It can take several years. So don't worry too much about it, but yeah, if it's something you fancy trying, well, it definitely worked for me.